Ryan and the other soldiers were crushing barbells, their muscles straining, voices echoing off the gym walls. Laughter erupted at every misstep of the women around them, cruel jokes thrown like weapons. Each snide comment was sharpened by arrogance, by the belief that strength alone defined authority. The women moved with care, measured, invisible in the eyes of men who thought dominance came from size, not skill. Then Jessica entered. She didn't announce herself. She didn't compete for attention. She just walked in calm, composed, every step deliberate. Ryan glanced at her and scoffed, convinced she was nothing more than a technician. The smirk on his face was sharp, predatory, ready to humiliate her like he had done countless times before. Jessica didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She only asked, her voice quiet but firm, "Mind if I try?" She pointed at the 405 barbell. The room froze, laughter paused in disbelief, and then exploded into mocking jeers. But then it happened. Jessica lifted the weight, fluid and controlled, her form perfect, every muscle coordinated with quiet precision. The laughter died instantly. Ryan's smirk faltered, disbelief flashing across his eyes, replaced by a flicker of fear, humiliation, and shock he hadn't felt before. The gym seemed to hold its breath as Jessica set the bar down with absolute control. Then her gaze locked on Ryan. Cold, steady, full of unspoken promise. She would not forget, she would not forgive, not just for herself, but for every woman who had been belittled, ignored, or humiliated in that space. And at that moment, the game changed forever. But before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Now, let's understand how this story really began. The gym smelled of chalk, metal, and recycled air, a scent that clung to the lungs and coaxed focus out of the inattentive. Sunlight filtered through high, narrow windows, cutting thin lines across rubber mats scuffed from years of forceful repetition. Lieutenant Ryan Gross stood at the center of it, hands wrapped in worn tape, a barbell loaded with 4 plates per side balanced across his trapezius. The metallic clang, when he dropped it, reverberated against the concrete walls, a sound meant as both punctuation and warning. He exhaled, slow, deliberate, and allowed a smirk to creep across his face. His jaw flexed with the familiar ache of exertion. A bead of sweat traced the ridge of his temple. Around him, his platoon, mostly junior enlisted, shifted uncomfortably, the rhythm of their warm-ups disrupted by his performance. "That's how standards are enforced," he said, voice carrying the weight of certainty. "Strength doesn't lie." His gaze swept across the room, measuring, evaluating, the practiced eye of someone convinced that muscle dictated authority. In the corner, 3 female officers executed kettlebell circuits. Sarah, an intelligence officer, moved with precise, economical motions, her forearms taut under the fluorescent glare. Maria, cyber, pivoted fluidly between swings and goblet squats, eyes scanning her tablet only when necessary. Chloe, medical, controlled every motion as if each rep had a clinical requirement. Their breaths were even, measured. Not a flicker of challenge or acknowledgement met Ryan's overbearing presence. He noticed, of course, he always noticed. "Careful, ladies," he called, voice a notch aloud, resonating across the mat floor. "Those aren't office supplies, commissaries down the hall." Some officers let a polite, nervous laugh escape. Others remained statuesque, hands gripping handles, muscles tense beneath standard-issue PT shirts. Complaints had been filed before, allegations of harassment, of intimidation, quietly archived. Nothing had ever materialized. Then the doors opened. Jessica entered without the fanfare Ryan's ego demanded. No formal knock, no announcement over the intercom. Gray sweats clung to her, functional and unadorned. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, no bobby pins jutting, no strands loose to betray vanity or distraction. She moved through the room with the efficiency of someone whose energy was neither wasted nor broadcasted. Her gaze swept over the platoon, not for affirmation, but for assessment. She stopped at Ryan's platform. "Are you done with this station, Lieutenant?" Her tone was calm, neutral, but the weight behind it made the air seem thicker. Ryan's eyes tracked her, the initial flicker of disbelief morphing into a sneer. "This is 405, he said, emphasizing the load, letting the clang still echo in the background. "Ellipticals are for support staff," he flexed, triceps straining, the motion deliberate. Jessica chalked her hands, fingers rubbing the powder into her palms, preparing not for spectacle, but for execution. "Is it okay if I try?" she asked, voice low, controlled, deliberately stripping the moment of dramatics. Laughter erupted immediately, not from humor, but from disbelief. Ryan's smirk widened, his teeth flashing in a grin that mirrored a predator enjoying the perceived weakness of prey. The women paused mid-rep, subtle glances exchanged. There was curiosity, yes, but caution anchored every movement. Jessica did not flinch, she did not respond to the laughter. She moved toward the bar, her hands gripped a cold steel. Fingers locked, thumbs wrapped. She inhaled once, chest expanding, diaphragm flexing, then she pulled. The bar left the floor as smoothly as a pendulum swinging through measured angles, muscles contracting with efficient kinetic chain recruitment, legs, hips, spinal erectors, deltoids, forearms. No hitch, no micro-adjustment, no visible tremor. Shoulders locked, scapulae retracted, grip firm. For 3 seconds, time itself seemed to pause. The bar returned to the floor under control, no thud to announce triumph, silence filled the gym. Ryan's jaw tightened imperceptibly, nostrils flaring as blood pressure ticked upward. He glanced at his platoon. Their eyes were wide, unguarded, betraying the respect that had already anchored itself in the unspoken air. Jessica stepped closer, the faint scent of chalk dust following her. Her gaze remained trained on him, unyielding but calm. "Your setup is wrong," she said quietly, measured, surgical. "You're lifting with attitude instead of structure." The words were not loud, but they cut deeper than any rebuke he had expected. Ryan's face flushed, a color rising from the base of his neck to the temples. He opened his mouth, words forming in defiance, but they died unspoken as Jessica pivoted away. Her posture exuded certainty, discipline, a professional calm that rendered the loudest ego irrelevant. "Enjoy the gym," she said, over her shoulder, voice even, deliberate. "You won't own it much longer." The words lingered, a promise delivered without spectacle, without theatrics. Ryan's hands trembled slightly as he clenched them into fists. The room seemed to contract around him, each breath became deliberate, audible only to him. The barbell, inert and indifferent, rested on the mat. It did not care about rank, it did not care about strength. It only responded to precision, to technique, to control. And in that moment, Ryan realized, somewhere deep beneath the muscle and ego, that precision had arrived and it was not on his side. Ryan's boot heel struck the tile with sharp, uneven thuds as he stormed into the locker room. Metal lockers rattled under the vibration, a low drone of disturbance vibrating through the air. Sweat from the gym clung to his shirt, but it was neither fatigue nor exertion that drove him. It was the sting of disrupted authority, the sudden awareness that someone had moved inside his sphere without permission. His jaw clenched, the masseter flexing under taut skin. Eyes flicked to every shadow, every corner, scanning, hunting. "Find her," he barked, voice clipped, reverberating off the cinderblock walls. The words left no room for hesitation. They demanded action, obedience, compliance. The petty officer paused, hesitation written across his features in micro-expressions Ryan recognized all too well. A tick flickered at the corner of his eye, a tightening of the jaw, the subtle purse of lips that spoke of uncertainty. "Sir, there are already inquiries, equal opportunity. She may be connected," the post said carefully, voice low, measured, weighing each syllable like a defensive operator avoiding a trigger finger on volatile terrain. Ryan's nostrils flared. The subtle rise and fall of his chest betrayed the rush of adrenaline, the spike of internal blood pressure. "Then she just made herself visible," he snarled, teeth gritting, hand curling into a fist, knuckles whitening as if to physically grasp control over the anomaly he could not yet define. But she hadn't made herself visible. There was no signature in the personnel database. No assignment noted in the duty roster, no contractor paperwork. Her existence was an absence, a ghost in the system. Depot hesitated again, scanning a tablet for some breadcrumb, some trace that could be weaponized into comprehension. "She's a ghost," he admitted, voice dropping into near whisper, the words carrying a mixture of awe and unease. Ryan's gaze hardened, narrowing, scanning every line of the PO's face for defiance, for weakness. "No," he said, voice low, controlled, almost surgical, "she's a threat." The single word carried weight, a distilled declaration of intent, precise and unyielding. His thumb flexed against the seam of his tactical belt, a subtle tick that mirrored the rising tension behind his eyes. Across the base, in a building whose very existence was compartmentalized, Jessica sat at a rectangular table in a secure briefing room. The doors bore the stenciled warning, "Red Cell, authorized personnel only." The faint hum of ventilation punctuated the room, an ever-present reminder of isolation. Sarah, Maria, and Chloe sat across from her, their posture disciplined, hands resting on folders, fingers flexing intermittently over notes and data pads. Micro-adjustments, small breaths, the occasional bite of a lip, each gesture underscored focus and the quiet tension of anticipation. Jessica slid a folder across the polished surface. The motion was deliberate, controlled, devoid of flourish. "This is sanctioned," she said. "Voice even. Low, precise, admiral level, training evaluation. You're protected." The words were simple, clinical, yet carried an unspoken weight. Consequence, accountability, authority descending through a chain of command that could not be bypassed. Sarah's hand hovered over the folder before closing her fingers around it, nails pressing into cardboard. Her throat shifted audibly as she swallowed, the slight hitch betraying the question forming in her mind. "And if we fail?" Jessica did not blink. Her gaze held, sharp, measured. "Then nothing changes," she replied, each syllable weighted, the cadence controlled to reinforce the inevitability of their objective. "Which is why we won't." A slight exhale punctuated the statement, subtle but perceptible to anyone attuned to the rhythm of controlled stress. Her hands rested atop the folder, thumbs flexing minutely, a quiet display of readiness and authority. Outside, the base moved on, unaware of the silent war brewing in its interior corridors. Ryan's shadow stretched long across the locker room tiles as he processed the unseen threat, tension radiating through every muscle fiber, each neural impulse alert and reactive. In the red cell room, the three analysts absorbed every nuance of Jessica's instructions, bodies cold like springs, the air thick with unspoken understanding. This was not training for ego, nor spectacle, but for precision, judgment, and survival under pressure. Jessica's eyes flicked to each of them, noting the micro-expressions, a tightening of a jaw, a flexed knuckle, the brief exhale between inhales. Small signals that revealed mental states hidden beneath discipline. In this room, as in the gym, control was currency. And control was theirs to wield if only they could trust it, and themselves. The base hummed with static energy, the low-frequency vibration of diesel generators mingling with the chatter of radio nets and the faint metallic clang of tools in maintenance space. Rumors circulated like sparks, a dried brush, an untraceable figure, unaccounted for in personnel logs, challenging the status quo. In the corridors, whispers collided with the sharp cadence of boots on linoleum. The grinder, the informal social network of the SEAL teams, buzzed with speculation. Every glance, every sidelong nod, carried weight. Lieutenant Ryan Gross stepped into formation with the smooth authority of a man accustomed to unquestioned obedience. His eyes swept the line of Alpha Platoon, noting posture, uniform alignment, the subtle flicker of eyelids that betrayed internal fatigue or hesitation. He inhaled sharply, chest expanding under the crisp contour of his PT shirt. Since standards seem unclear, he announced, voice precise, carrying the authority of rank and expectation, Alpha Platoon will run a command-approved evaluation against a volunteer officer. The line shifted. Small adjustments in stance, hands flexing around the edges of rifles or data pads. The announcement carried the gravity of sanctioned action. This was not casual PT, it was controlled exposure, observation, testing. The murmurs ran beneath it, curiosity tempered with caution. Each operator instinctively scanned, calculated, assessing variables, location, force composition, potential threats. Jessica stepped forward. Multicam clung to her like a second skin, sleeves rolled neatly, the seams unwrinkled, tactical boots silent against the floor. No rank insignia adorned her chest or shoulders, yet every micromovement spoke of training refined beyond conventional measure. Fingers curled briefly, flexing as she adjusted the gloves over her palms, wrists aligning with forearms in a posture that implied readiness without aggression. "We volunteer," she said, calm, measured, letting the words settle. The three analysts behind her mirrored the composure, their micro-expressions tightened jawlines, subtle eyelid ticks, shallow but controlled breathing revealing the anticipation of operational challenge without breaching discipline. Ryan's head tilted slightly, a short, calculated exhale passing through his nostrils, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. Laughter escaped him, clit and incredulous, more a reflex than genuine humor. "You ain't three analysts." His voice carried disbelief, an underestimation that would soon become a liability. He flexed his forearm subtly, fingers brushing against his belt buckle as if to reassure himself of physical dominance. Jessica met his gaze without flinch. Her eyes, sharp, controlled, locked on his, reading the flickers of doubt masked beneath arrogance. "Unless you're worried," she said, voice even, calm, precise. The inflection was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it carried the weight of a challenge that was both professional and personal, calibrated to provoke assessment without initiating confrontation. He exhaled through his teeth, a faint flare of nostrils betraying a spike of adrenaline. He was not smart enough, nor disciplined enough in that moment, to step back. The momentum of ego carried him forward. Friday. "Kill house, sim rounds," the words left his mouth with the authority of command, but the register in his tone betrayed a faint tremor and undercurrent of anticipation, unacknowledged, unwelcome. Approval was logged, witnesses were present, a petty officer to monitor procedure, an automated recording system to document timing, loads, and safety compliance. Every variable accounted for, every contingency anticipated. The decision, though appearing casual, was procedural command sanctioned, recorded, auditable. Yet beneath the procedural veneer, a trap was already set, invisible to those who could not see beyond immediate metrics of strength, volume, and overt leadership display. Jessica exhaled subtly, letting her chest expand beneath her armor-clad torso. Her hands flexed, recalibrating grip on the straps of her tactical vest, readying her for engagement without theatrics. Behind her, Sarah adjusted the tablet interface, fingers precise over controls, ensuring environmental variables and simulation parameters aligned with sanctioned training objectives. Maria cross-checked network access and override protocols, eye-scanning encrypted feeds with microsecond attention. Chloe, posture impeccable, adjusted her comms headset, monitoring vitals and situational awareness data for all participants. Outside the kill house, the lights glimmered against reinforced steel doors, NVG-compatible sensors blinking faintly, environmental cues pre-programmed, pressures calibrated. Every operational element synchronized to simulate chaos, yet fully controlled and auditable. Ryan, unaware, moved toward the trap with the confidence of dominance untested. Every laugh, every glance at his men, every posture adjustment measured, yes, but blind to the depth of analysis converging against him. And within that convergence, precision waited, not loud, not flamboyant. Just steady, exact, and lethal in its quiet professionalism. Jessica's approach was surgical, invisible, yet absolute. She did not instruct them on marksmanship or fire discipline in the traditional sense. The fundamentals were assumed. She trained perception, cognitive speed, and tactical decision-making under duress. The kill house was their canvas, chaos their paint, and every movement measured in milliseconds. "Ryan clears space," she said, voice calm, controlled, almost clinical. "He doesn't interrogate it," the statement hung in the air like a rule extracted from doctrine. Ryan Gross would move forward with confidence, a physical extension of ego, assuming dominance equaled control. Jessica allowed him that presumption, framing the environment so that his assumptions became data points in a larger simulation. Operators moved with deliberate intent, timing was drilled into their muscle memory, entrance sequences, breach responses, the subtle pause before clearing corners. Signal discipline was instilled every call, every hand gesture, every body shift a communicative act, codifying and enforced. Environmental control was non-negotiable. Light, sound, temperature, and visual cues were manipulated to simulate disorientation, forcing operators to process anomalies without conscious panic. Maria operated the digital backbone, fingers hovered over keyboards, micro-adjusting firewalls, sensor feeds, and electronically controlled doors. Overrides were strictly legal, pre-approved, but functioned as variables within the scenario. Her micro-expressions betrayed no emotion, only the minutiae of cognitive load, a brief tightening of her jaw, A flicker of her pupil as she confirmed system latency. The subtle flex of a wrist as she recalibrated the fee. Sarah's role was cerebral, constructing decision trees that guided operators through probable contingencies. Each branch represented a choice, each consequence rehearsed in simulation, creating a lattice of situational awareness that extended beyond immediate visual cues. She monitored Ryan's formation, noting his micro-adjustments, the tiny hitch in his shoulder as he anticipated a clear path, the blink rate that accelerated with uncertainty, the fraction of a second hesitation before he crossed thresholds. Chloe orchestrated controlled chaos, introducing environmental stressors calibrated to test cognitive resilience. Smoke generators, timed flashes, variable audio cues, each designed to fracture the illusion of certainty while remaining within safety parameters. She watched operators adapt, noting subtle ticks, fists clenched then released, rapid shallow breaths, micro-shifts of weight, betraying subconscious calculation. Her eyes tracked physiological markers with the precision of a clinician, interpreting behavioral cues in real time. The team broke down, systematically. Physical form remained intact, but cognitive comfort eroded. Instinctive assumptions failed under layered variables, and automatic responses were exposed as insufficient. Ryan's command style, predicated on intimidation and brute force, was nullified in an environment that rewarded patience, observation, and adaptive reasoning. Micro-missteps, ignored in standard training, became instructive failures, data points to be corrected. Jessica observed, silent, noting every nuance. She walked among them without touching, a phantom presence enforcing discipline through observation. When a body posture faltered, when eyes flicked along to an anticipated threat, when hands tightened unnecessarily, she intervened. Her corrections were minimal, precise, a verbal cue, a subtle gesture, a repositioning of weight. She rebuilt them incrementally, realigning instinct with analysis, reflex with awareness. Each repetition reinforced the doctrine: efficiency without ego, clarity without panic, authority without intimidation. Jessica's methods were invisible to the untrained eye, yet every operator internalized the lesson. The kill house was no longer a space to display strength. It was a laboratory, and they were specimens under scrutiny. By the end of the session, the operators were exhausted but sharper. Every neuron fired with awareness, every micro-expression catalogued, every hesitation noted. Ryan, in particular, felt the subtle erosion of certainty, a creeping awareness that force alone could not dominate. The foundation of his confidence had shifted imperceptibly, like sand slipping beneath the soles of boots, leaving only structure, timing, and calculated decision-making in its place. Jessica stepped back, letting the room breathe. Her eyes scanned each operator, noting the imperceptible improvements, slight relaxations in clenched fists, steadier blinking, the settling of weight across feet, subtle exhalations indicating internalization. They were still operators, still human, but rebuilt. Precision had replaced arrogance. Observation had replaced assumption. Thought had replaced reflex. The briefing room was filled with the faint, sterile hum of fluorescent lights and the low whir of climate control, an artificial calm masking the undercurrent of anticipation. Rows of chairs were neatly aligned, polished surfaces reflecting muted glints of insignia and service ribbons. The room smelled faintly of leather, paper, and the metallic tang of disciplined expectation. Officers and operators seated themselves with practiced precision, every hand placement, every posture a study in controlled professionalism. At the front, the podium gleamed under the overhead lights, polished to a reflective sheen. The sound of boots on the polished floor echoed once, twice, as the Admiral approached, his movements deliberate, weight measured. He paused, letting the room adjust to his presence, chest rising and falling in a rhythm that signaled authority without need for words. Silence crystallized, the micro-movements of the room, the shifting of feet, the subtle flex of fingers over notebooks, the occasional blink becoming amplified in the stillness. He lifted a hand slightly, then lowered it, and the room settled. Commander Jessica Vance, DevGru. Red Cell Lead, he announced, voice firm, resonant, carrying the weight of command and operational legacy. The words rolled through the room with finality, landing in the minds of those present like the impact of a precision strike. Jessica stepped forward. Dressed whites framed her form, impeccable in cut and alignment. The trident rested over her left breast, the silver star glinting faintly under the harsh light. Every movement, heels adjusting on polished floor, shoulders square, chin leveled, was deliberate. She did not smile. There was no need for theatrics. Presence itself conveyed authority. The micro-adjustment of her fingers over the edge of the podium, a slight exhale through her nostrils, the almost imperceptible widening of her eyes as she scanned the assembled operators. Each gesture carried the weight of discipline and experience. Ryan's reaction was immediate, though subtle. His pupils contracted, a brief chill passing through his chest as if a cold current had snaked along his spine. The mouth that had so often smirked in arrogance tightened, the corners pulled slightly downward. His hands flexed around his clipboard, knuckles whitening, fingers pressing against the edge as if to assert control over a situation already slipping from his grasp. A micro-twitch at the corner of his left eye betrayed the internal calculation kicking in, an attempt to measure threat, authority, and operational credibility in real time. Jessica's gaze swept the room, lingering on Ryan just long enough for the subtle shift to register. She exhaled softly, a measured rhythm that carried authority in its calm. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice low, precise, without inflection or flourish, "we test leadership." The words were declarative, surgical, leaving no room for negotiation or doubt. Every operator in the room felt the unspoken implication. Decisions, judgment, and command would now be evaluated not by rank or volume, but by clarity, accuracy, and foresight under pressure. Sarah's fingers tightened briefly around her notebook, releasing with a slow, controlled exhale. Maria's eyes flicked toward the simulation parameters displayed on the screens, pupils narrowing as she cross-checked environmental variables and contingencies. Chloe adjusted her posture, subtly shifting her weight to optimize balance, microflexing her wrists as she prepared for the imminent operational assessment. Even without explicit commands, each analyst aligned instinctively with the doctrine Jessica had drilled: anticipation, precision, and cognitive agility. Ryan's jaw flexed. He inhaled through the nose, chest expanding, exhaling in a controlled rhythm, yet the subtle spike of cortisol betrayed itself in the fraction of a second hesitation before he spoke. Micro-expressions, the tightening around his eyes, the barely perceptible flare of his nostrils, the shift of weight from heel to toe signaled the first cracks in the armor of overconfidence he had worn like body armor. Jessica stepped back slightly, letting the room absorb the impact of her presence and the gravity of the Admiral's sanction. The polished floors, the rows of disciplined bodies, the gleaming insignia, everything receded into the operational reality she had constructed. The kill house, the simulations, the controls, the decision-making matrices all awaited execution. And for Ryan, the lesson was already underway, subtle, inexorable, silent. Leadership, she had demonstrated, was not granted by rank. It was earned in moments of clarity under pressure, measured not by force, but by judgment. Her eyes scanned once more, the faintest micro-adjustment of a brow signaling awareness, readiness, and the promise that observation would be absolute. Tomorrow, the operators would be tested, Ryan would be exposed, and the quiet professional calculus of precision, timing, and thought would replace ego, leaving only what was operationally indispensable. Darkness swallowed the kill house, a void that smelled of rubber, gunpowder residue, and the faint metallic tang of sweat. The operators moved like shadows themselves, boots silent on the padded floors, fingers brushing the seams of gear, eyes scanning through reflex and habit. Ryan stacked magazines on the staging table with mechanical precision, the metallic click of steel against steel marking a rhythm that mirrored the spike of his heartbeat. Each motion was controlled, deliberate, yet beneath the surface, micro-tremors betrayed the first flickers of unacknowledged anticipation. He entered blind, the room absorbing him in blackness, corridors and corners indistinguishable. NVG-compatible sensors blinked faintly, then stutter, strobes cutting across his field of view at disorienting intervals. Ryan's pupils dilated instinctively, the subtle hitch in his breathing almost imperceptible. His hand tightened around the grip of his M4, knuckles whitening, thumb flexing over the selector switch. The familiar weight of authority pressed against his spine, yet without visual dominance, every learned assumption became data to be recalculated. Lights failed entirely, plunging the operators into total blackout for a fraction of a second that stretched into the perception of time slowed by training and fear. Audio cues were warped, distant shouts, metallic clangs, and the subtle scuff of boots became irregular, spatially deceptive. Ryan's head jerked, a micro-adjustment of the neck as he tried to triangulate source and direction. Each breath was measured, diaphragm expanding then contracting with precise rhythm, attempting to maintain composure in an environment where instinctual dominance failed. His men fell one by one, systematically, not to superior marksmanship, not to physical superiority, but to predictive engagement and tactical calculation. Eyes widened, pupils contracting, subtle micro-twitches of fingers as weapons were lowered in response to unseen maneuvers. Every operator caught in the simulation responded correctly, yet too slowly, just slightly behind the vector of anticipation. Micro-errors, weight shifts, blink patterns, momentary hesitation before crossing thresholds were enough for tactical failure. Ryan's subordinates recalibrated instinctively, but the advantage had already shifted. Ryan moved through the lanes, feet precise, shoulders squared, every movement designed to dominate space. Yet each decision he made, each calculated step, was preempted. Lines of sight were controlled before he entered them. Angles he assumed safe were already manipulated by environmental design and predictive placement. Micro-adjustments in body mechanics, hip rotation, shoulder alignment, eye flicker made his reflexes slower, his cognitive load higher. The kill house was no longer a space to demonstrate force. It was a calculus problem rendered in 3 dimensions, with consequences simulated but exacting. Audio continued to distort, forcing reliance on visual cues that were intentionally ambiguous. NVG strobe intervals varied, presenting phantom contacts, triggering startle reflexes and micro-shifts in focus. Ryan's breathing grew shallower, but controlled an attempt to maintain the disciplined cadence of a trained operator, though his subconscious acknowledged the failure in predictive judgment. His chest rose and fell against tactical armor, each inhalation measured against the rhythm of auditory distortion and light flicker. He observed his team, noting the slow recoveries after each engagement. Micro-expressions betrayed fear, frustration, and recalibration. Fists unclenched then tightened. Pupils flickered to NVG monitors and back to darkened lanes. Subtle ticks at corners of mouths indicated mental strain. Ryan's own micro-expressions mirrored theirs, nostrils flaring subtly, jaw flexing, a brief head shake that he masked quickly, pupils darting in rapid succession, processing variables faster than his reflexes could respond. By the time the scenario concluded, the kill house had executed a silent, surgical deconstruction of ego. Ryan had not been outshot. Bullets had not dictated failure, he had been outthought. His assumptions, honed over years of command, had collided with predictive precision and environmental mastery. Each step, each tactical choice, had been anticipated, cataloged, and countered. Silence filled the room when the lights stabilized, a vacuum of awareness where arrogance had once dictated pace. The operators adjusted posture, exhaled subtly, micro-shifts of weight signaling internal processing, yet no one celebrated. There was no spectacle, only the quiet affirmation of mastery achieved through observation, prediction, and controlled execution. The hum of the kill house faded, replaced by a distorted playback of Ryan's own voice, filtered through speakers that twisted cadence and tone, stretching syllables, breaking rhythm. Every command he had issued, every reprimand, every assertion of authority echoed back with delay, warped into an unfamiliar cadence that chipped at his mental register. Micro-adjustments in posture betrayed subconscious processing. His shoulders stiffened, neck flexed minutely, eyes flicking to corners where nothing awaited him. His comms went silent, no chatter, no confirmation tones, no status updates from his men. The frequency that had been a lifeline, a tether to situational awareness, now offered only absence. He raised his hand, toggled the radio, thumb flexing over the switch with precision, but each click yielded only static. Micro-expressions betrayed internal recalibration, a rapid blink, the twitch of a brow, a tightening around the jawline. His breath, measured until now, caught slightly before resuming a controlled rhythm, a physical acknowledgement that the familiar chain of command was severed. Ryan pivoted, scanning the corridors and lanes. Darkness swallowed the space, NVG strobes flickering intermittently, shadows dancing across walls and floors in deceptive patterns. Each step he took was deliberate, calculated, toes pressing, heels anchoring, shoulders squared to control weight distribution. Yet without feedback, the calculation became incomplete. Assumptions-filled voice he could no longer verify. Micro-shifts of weight revealed hesitation born not of fear, but of disorientation. He adjusted stance, rebalanced center of mass, and exhaled through pursed lips, chest rising and falling in slow increments, as though reminding his body that control was still possible even if certainty was gone. Operators who had been his subordinates were unaccounted for. A silent absence resonated more loudly than any noise. Their positions, tactical vectors, and expected responses became unknowns in a rapidly collapsing equation. Ryan's internal pulse accelerated in subtle, physiologically traceable ways. Heartbeat quickened just enough to trigger minor muscle tremors, tiny shifts in ocular focus, an imperceptible tightening around the phalanges of his hands. He flexed and unclenched, seeking control through muscle memory as his cognitive map updated against incomplete data. The room itself became adversarial. Walls, doors, and corners, once familiar, now offered deceptive continuity. Acoustic feedback created phantom contacts, micro-stutters in peripheral vision suggested movement where none existed. His eyes darted, pupils contracting, scanning sequentially in a methodical pattern. Eyelids twitched as he reconciled expectations with distorted input. The subtle flare of nostrils indicated the intake of controlled oxygen, a means to stabilize heart rate and cognitive acuity. Certainty, once absolute, collapsed imperceptibly at first, then with undeniable weight. Assumptions about command, control, and spatial dominance unraveled under the layered stressors. Jessica, at engineer. Ryan's micro-expressions, fleeting twitches at the corner of his eyes, a brief contraction of the jaw, a half-step back revealed the neural computation of a trained operator attempting to reconcile authority with absence. Every practiced dominance maneuver, every habitual micro-command, became irrelevant. He stood alone. The air seemed heavier, almost tactile against the skin of his forearms, a reminder of isolation not mitigated by physical presence, rank, or force projection. The silence was complete, not just auditory, but operational. No subordinate cues, no radio chatter, no external confirmation. Just Ryan, recalibrating his senses against absence, analyzing micro-patterns in light flickers, air displacement, and the faint echoes of his own distorted voice. Each second stretched, measured in millisecond increments, as he adjusted breathing, stance, and ocular focus. The realization crystallized that dominance could not be asserted through volume, intimidation, or predictable movement. Control was cognitive, iterative, precise. Alone, every calculation mattered, and every misstep became immediately consequential. His hands unclenched, then flexed again, the pulse in his forearm ticking in sync with the micro-adjustments of his shoulders and neck. Isolation was not punishment, it was evaluation. And in that vacuum, Ryan confronted the fundamental truth of the kill house: authority without awareness, ego without adaptability, presence without precision, all collapsed into irrelevance. Only observation, only measured cognition, only anticipation remained. The corridor was dimly lit, NVG-adjusted illumination casting angular shadows along steel walls. Every surface reflected in ambiguous geometry, giving the impression of depth where there was none, and concealing potential hazards with precision. Ryan advanced with mechanical certainty, M4 at the ready, scanning each corner with trained repetition. Boots contacted the reinforced floor with controlled pressure, toes absorbing impact, heels stabilizing balance, shoulders squared in practiced readiness. Each breath was measured, inhaling through the nose, exhaling slowly through pursed lips. A faint, almost imperceptible click resonated beneath his boots. Ryan paused, micro-adjusting stance, toes pivoting subtly to redistribute weight, fingers tightening around the pistol grip. His head rotated, neck muscles flexing, eyes narrowing to a pinpoint. There was no audible cue, only a micro-vibration transmitted through the sole of his boot, registering in his cerebellum as a slight anomaly in tactile feedback. Micro-expression, the brief twitch at the corner of his left eye, a barely noticeable flare of the nostrils, a micro-clench of the jaw, the pressure plate activated. A simulated kill flashed across the heads-up display in his helmet. Red letters, synchronized auditory feedback through the comm unit, visual overlay confirming target neutralization. The effect was instantaneous yet disorienting. Ryan froze mid-step, chest standing in a shallow inhale, shoulders locked, head tilting slightly to the left, micro-shifting weight without disengaging grip from the weapon. His training screened to react, to clear, to move, but the simulation denied the expected outcome. Every practiced motion, every default response, had been preempted. Above, Jessica observed from a mezzanine observation deck. The angle of her eyes tracked Ryan's movements with surgical precision. Every microfacial adjustment, every blink, every fractional shift in weight was catalogued. Her exhalation was controlled, almost imperceptible, yet resonant with authority. Lips pressed lightly together, a slight furrow in the brow as she analyzed reaction patterns. Fingers flexed subtly against the railing, posture perfectly aligned, a model of quiet professional calculation. "You rushed," she said, voice calm, precise, carrying authority without inflection. Her words were not a rebuke in emotion, but a surgical correction delivered with exact timing. Ryan's micro-expression betrayed recognition, a rapid blink, the fraction of a second twitch at the corner of his eye, a micro-flex of the jaw as he digested the implication. His shoulders dropped a millimeter, a subconscious concession that the rhythm he relied on had been disrupted. "You assumed," she continued, the cadence steady, measured, each syllable emphasizing the operational consequence of preconception. Ryan's eyes narrowed imperceptibly, nostrils flaring, pupils contracting. He shifted weight slightly, recalibrating stance and center of mass, fingers flexing around the rifle. The simulation had forced the deconstruction of his habitual response loops. Instinctive dominance had collided with engineered unpredictability, and the outcome was immediate and undeniable. The operators positioned themselves in the periphery, observing without overt reaction. Sarah's fingers hovered over the tablet, monitoring environmental feedback, noting timing between sensor activation and operator response. Maria's eyes tracked the override systems, micro-adjusting displays to capture latency and variance in the simulation. Chloe recorded micro-behavioral responses, blink frequency, head tilt, weight distribution. Every physiological nuance was being captured, cataloged, and analyzed, silently reinforcing the doctrine Jessica had implemented. Ryan's internal pulse raced in subtle increments, hands flexing and unclenching, breathing recalibrated in microcycles. The weight of anticipation pressed against his spine, unmitigated by physical advantage or historical rank. Every step forward now required recalculated probability, every movement assessed against unknown contingencies. The kill house had stripped certainty, leaving only controlled cognition, anticipation, and measure adaptation. Jessica's eyes followed him until he stabilized, absorbing the lesson embedded in the moment. Forward movement without full assessment carried consequence. Reaction alone could no longer dictate outcome. Authority was not granted by rank, command volume, or reflex. It was earned by precise observation, calculated decision, and patient execution. Her posture remained unbroken, eyes sharp, breathing steady, as if the room itself recognized her control over both space and outcome. Ryan exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly, micro-shifting weight as he processed the data. The simulation had ended, but the lesson remained. Precision surpassed aggression, calculation superseded assumption, and the quiet professional always observed before acting. The training base smelled faintly of antiseptic, mixed with the sharp tang of rubber mats and the metallic hint of exertion. Fluorescent lights reflected off polished floors, outlining the space with clinical clarity. Operators were positioned along the periphery, observing silently, micro-adjusting stance, breathing through subtle diaphragmatic control, fingers lightly flexing over gear or notebooks. Each movement was deliberate, a study in controlled professionalism, every operator an unspoken extension of doctrine. "This portion is optional," the safety officer announced, voice carrying clearly across the bay, formal and neutral, a procedural cue more than a suggestion. The words resonated in the space, reverberating against walls, subtly shifting the microdynamics of attention. Ryan's pupils constricted as he registered the verbal cue, micro shifts of weight in his boots, a subtle tightening around his shoulders, fingers curling briefly around his forearms in anticipation, indicated the subliminal processing of choice versus expectation. Ryan stepped forward, his gait measured, precise, toes gripping mat, heels subtly flexing to anchor stance. Every step was calculated to convey authority and readiness. Jaw muscles contracted almost imperceptibly. Eyes narrowed, scanning Jessica's posture, her alignment, her readiness for engagement. Micro-ticks betrayed the cascade of calculations in progress, a tiny flex of the temple muscle, slight flare of nostrils, brief twitch of the corner of the eye. He exhaled subtly, maintaining controlled breathing, attempting to synchronize physiological state with intended aggression, with anticipation of action. Jessica acknowledged his approach with a slight nod, minimal yet absolute. Her stance did not shift, shoulders squared, chin leveled, eyes locked on his micro-adjustments. Fingers flexed lightly, subtly, controlling tension through muscle memory, a silent calibration of force and timing. Her presence communicated authority without sound, the quiet professional enforcing control through observation, subtle shifts, and the promise of precise intervention. Ryan initiated the swing, a controlled arc of intent, wrists tight, forearm aligned, body mechanics deliberate to maximize leverage and speed. Micro-jerks of motion were present in the execution, a fractional over-rotation of the shoulder, a barely perceptible hitch in hip rotation, micro-adjustments in foot placement attempting balance. The swing was textbook, yet it carried the weight of expectation, authority, and ego. Jessica intercepted with surgical precision. Movement was minimal, biomechanically optimized, body weight distributed through hips and legs, core engaged, forearm aligned to absorb and redirect force without strain. Her response was instantaneous, a seamless engagement of leverage and pressure points, ending the swing cleanly. The mat absorbed the micro-force transfer. No extra motion, no theatrics, only exact, controlled execution. Her eyes did not flinch, yet pupils contracted slightly, tracking his micro-reactions in real time. "Tap," she said. Calm, deliberate, voice carrying authority without inflection. The syllables struck the operational threshold of acknowledgement, the signal that control, precision, and safety had been reasserted. Ryan's micro-expressions betrayed recognition, a blink, a subtle downward shift of the jaw, a micro-flicker of the eyelids, shoulders releasing imperceptibly. He executed the tap, a single, controlled response, signaling acceptance of the lesson without verbal confirmation. Debay exhaled silently. Observers absorbed the event, noting micro-ticks and subtle adjustments in Ryan's posture, recalculating patterns of behavior under applied control. Sarah's eyes flicked over notations, fingers flexing over the stylus as she tracked timing and reaction. Maria scanned the structural alignment of both operators, noting minute biomechanical corrections. Chloe registered the microphysiological markers, blink frequency, nostril flare, jaw tension. Every detail was documented, every reaction logged. Jessica remained still, eyes scanning the bay, posture perfect, breathing even. The lesson was complete, no further motion was required. The demonstration had distilled hierarchy, force, and ego into a single, silent transaction. Precision and control surpassed aggression and assumption. Ryan's shoulders realigned subtly, hands unclenching, chest rising with slow, deliberate exhalation as internal processing recalibrated. The silence persisted, heavy with unspoken understanding. The combative's evaluation had concluded. The message was clear: authority in the kill house and in operational environments was derived not from volume, force, or historical dominance, but from measured application of knowledge, observation, and tactical precision. 2 weeks had passed. The gym smelled of polished steel, chalk dust lingering in the filtered air, mingling with the faint tang of worn mats and the subtle scent of sweat from disciplined repetition. Ryan sat at a desk tucked into the corner of the administrative bay, a stack of review folders before him. His posture was rigid, spine straight, shoulders square, hands resting lightly over the top folder as if to assert control over the documents, though the micro-twitch at the corner of his eye betrayed the internal turbulence he could not mask. Fingers tapped lightly against the laminate surface, microbeat, reflecting the rhythm of calculation, anticipation, and self-assessment. Across the gym, the women lifted. Sarah rotated through kettlebells with precise tempo, shoulders locked, elbows micro-aligned, each swing a study in biomechanics and disciplined cadence. Maria manipulated a cable system with controlled resistance, forearms flexing in incremental contractions, eyes tracking force vectors with analytical focus. Chloe adjusted plates on the Smith machine, hips anchor, micro-shifts in weight balancing precision and power. Each breath was measured, diaphragmatic expansion visible only to those trained to notice, exhalation controlled, minimizing extraneous motion while maximizing output. Jessica walked through the gym, booth silent on the polished floor. She carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who knew every microdetail would be observed and catalogued. Hair pulled tight, posture perfect, eyes scanning alignment, shoulder mechanics, grip, and the subtle shifts in micro-expression that betrayed momentary fatigue or exertion. No one interrupted her passage. Her presence commanded attention without demand, authority without ego. Ryan's eyes flicked up from the paperwork, the microfixation on the edge of his thumb revealing the residual imprint of the kill house, micro-twitches of his jaw, subtle narrowing of the eyes, the slight flex of a shoulder. He processed the women's lifts, the precision of motion, the discipline of repetition. Every operator's efficiency highlighted the lessons he had learned, not through command, but through observation, correction, and controlled evaluation. Jessica paused briefly near the squat racks, nodding almost imperceptibly to Sarah as she completed a set. Micro-adjustments of fingers, a barely noticeable exhale through her nose, a fractional tilt of the head, small cues that communicated recognition, approval, and silent mentorship. Maria's gaze followed Jessica's subtle movements, adjusting micro-alignments in her posture to maintain optimized force application. Chloe flexed wrists slightly, regripping plates with controlled pressure, maintaining continuity in motion, every movement under the subtle oversight that Jessica's presence implied. Ryan returned to the folders before him, hand brushing across the top as if to reclaim the illusion of authority. Micro shifts in weight, fingers curling then unclenching, slight adjustments of the neck and shoulders, betrayed awareness that the real measure of leadership was no longer in volume or dominance. It was in precision, observation, and the consistent execution of discipline. Jessica stopped at the center of the gym. A single, measured glance swept the space, surveying lifts, technique, spacing, and micro-behavioral cues. Without a word, she turned, boots silent, exhalation controlled, posture unwavering, leaving the operators to continue with uninterrupted focus. Ryan's eyes followed, pupils contracting as she departed. He exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly, micro-adjusting grip on his pen and leaning slightly forward, chest rising in careful rhythm. The bar remained, resting on the rack, polished steel glinting faintly under the fluorescent lights. It did not favor rank, gender, or reputation. It did not acknowledge ego or entitlement. It demanded alignment, structure, precision, and measured execution. Micro shifts in hand placement, shoulder rotation, and posture determined success, not force or authority. The bar was indifferent, only how it was lifted mattered. In that quiet, polished space, the lesson crystallized. Authority, skill, and respect were earned in silence, measured in discipline, and confirmed through execution. Ryan returned to the paperwork, the hum of activity around him, processing, absorbing, recalibrating. The operators continued their lifts, motion precise, breath controlled, a silent affirmation of standards now established, immutable, and undeniable. For those watching this story unfold and valuing the principles of discipline, precision, and quiet professionalism, remember, mastery is in observation, execution, and respect for the process. If you want to see more stories of tactical precision, operational discipline, and the lessons of quiet professional operators, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned.